So finally up and running. Firstly, sorry that this is in English. My technical level of French is not what it should be. So this is in English. Feel free to ask questions, as Eduardo said, in French or English, and I'll see what I can do with it. So the title of my talk is Be Beautiful, Front and Back. So JavaScript frameworks are considered to be very beautiful. You can create very nice looking applications, quite ugly ones as well sometimes, but you can do all kinds of stuff with it. It's very nice. And for me, I've got Django, it's Python based. I think it's a very beautiful programming language, which is why I've got beautiful at the back as well. So how many of you have ever tried putting Vue and Django together? Okay, you found it easy, not so easy? Okay. Fair enough. Is that just because it was awkward to set up? It's just Flask is easier if you're only serving an API. Okay. Okay. And how many people have tried to get Vue working with their own frameworks of choice? Okay, a few. Okay. So I actually decided to put this presentation together because from the first meetup, apparently there were quite a few people who were interested in using Vue, but hadn't actually used it. So I was like, okay, I'll take on the challenge. I'll try and implement it with my framework of choice, which is Django, and see what happens with it, and kind of do a kind of user experience type talk instead. So it's not very technical. It is just kind of what I've come across whilst trying to implement it. And I'll show you a kind of a small sample application at the end. So who am I? There's my name. I'm a web developer at Theodore, so along with Eduardo and some others in the audience, and where the first Vue meetup was. And I've been there since August 2015. I've only been in web development for about a year and a half, so still new to all of this, and Django was actually my first project that I picked up, mainly because I have more of a background in Python. So okay, find a Python framework. Django seemed quite nice. It was well documented. I'll take that and see what happens. So why put the two together? As I said, it was kind of a bit of an experiment, kind of hit and hope, see what happens. I found it to be a fairly powerful JavaScript framework. There's a hell of a lot you can do with it. I've only just started reading about it, and still a hell of a lot more to learn. Django is an incredibly powerful backend. It is used to power some of the biggest applications on the web. And again, beautiful front and back, as I said, pretty JavaScript web applications with a Python backend. It's beautiful programming. So I assume, if not all of you know what Django is. So it is a Python-based full-stack MVC framework. It was developed, I think, in 2003 at this newspaper in Kansas because they wanted something where they could update their news articles online in real time. So they developed this here, and they released it to the public in 2005. And it's now on a version at the bottom that may have gone up to 1.5 since I wrote this, which was a good few weeks ago, but it's about there, 1.9 anyway. It is MVC type, although they don't actually use that terminology. It is more MTV. So the view is actually templates and the controller is view. So when I talk about a Django view, it's actually the controller logic that you might be used to. And Vue.js comes right in that middle for all of the front-end pretty stuff. So I wanted to put the two together. It's like, how can I actually go about combining them? So Django has its own templating engine. The camera's not great there. It's not well. It's me who's not very well placed. So it has its own templating engine. So I try to use that, stick some Vue components into it, and see if I can make it work together. Then, obviously, I want to get some data out of the Django models. So I'm going to need an API somewhere. And then also, how can I actually interact between Vue and the API? So the first one, Django templates. This is just a a sample Django template of the application I'll show later. So very, very simple. It's very similar to Twig, if you know that, but it's just a Ginger template. Something I don't like about Django is the templates are quite kind of verbose. It's not like Jade templates, which are quite nice. They're very short and compact. Big problem with using Django with Vue. So Vue, the variables in a template are in the double curly braces. And it's the same thing if you want to implement Angular with it. Django uses the double curly braces for its template variables, and so does Vue. So you kind of have a conflict there. And if you're using Django to serve up the templates, the variables get resolved first by Django in the backend before getting served up at the front. So you actually don't see what you want. So in order to get around that, you can just change the configuration in Vue to use the square brackets instead of the curly braces. And it seems to work well enough. I haven't had any problems up until now, but again, it's been quite simple stuff. So maybe there'll be worse things around the corner. We'll see. Then Django doesn't come with a built-in API, certainly REST API. So you have to add some framework of your choice to it. So I used Django REST framework. There are others as well. I think Tasty Pie, maybe. I haven't actually used any others, only Django REST framework. It's incredibly easy to implement. It's very much like Django itself. It's incredibly well documented, just as the Django framework is. It's very, very easy to get up and running. And you can serve up various types of data, but JSON is the one we're using here, and it's the one that's default. So for using the Django REST framework, so firstly, in Django, I set up a model, I set up views, as I would for using it full stack. You then add the serializers on top of that to serve as an API. So you add a serializer for the model first, which is what I have here. So you can just import the serializer that's built into REST. You import the model from Django. That's just a very, very basic configuration. You specify the fields that you want to serialize, and that's it. That's all you have to do for the model. There are loads and loads of other options that you can have, validators, all kinds of things that you can add. But that is just a very, very basic example. That's all you need to get going. Next is adding the point of entry into. Okay, you have the URL. You arrive then at what is a Django view, which is here. So it's what's going to then send out all of the data that's pulled from the backend. So here you have the view sets in Django REST rather than the views. So here it's just you have a query set into the model, return all the objects in this sense. You can set up to whatever you like to serve up whatever components of the model you want. And then you specify the serializer. Django REST does all the rest for you. So no pun intended, but hey. And that gets delivered through the URL that you specified in the urls.py as part of your Django project. So very, very little to get that, to add the API endpoints to your Django project. Then how do you actually get it hooked up with Vue? How do you get Vue to then call these endpoints? So Vue doesn't have anything built in to actually call the endpoints. You have to then add the Vue resource, which allows you to have the $HTTP, and then you can make calls into your API. So that's what I have there, just to get the jobs list in this sense. And it sends the data into the jobs array to then be served up on the front end. So again, very, very easy. Nothing difficult about that. So as I said, the example, a very simple application. It's just a little job board, a single page with a form to post the job and then just list them on the bottom. So hopefully I'm not going to break anything by doing this. And in fact, I have done already. How the hell do I share a different screen?
You should stop sharing and share your entire desktop. I think you're just sharing the window.
Okay. Share screen. Share entire desktop. Okay. In fact, that is very nice. Okay, so you have the Django structure on the left, the Django project. You have the different modules, have the static folder templates. It's using a SQL-like database. Again, there's no need for anything complicated. And then some other stuff. You have a settings file. You can specify all the modules that you want, any middleware, your template route, the database you're going to use, anything to do with the application, any configuration you find in there, except the URLs. URLs is defined in a separate file, urls.py, and then you have your views, models, serializers, and finally the templates at the end. So I have a simple model, jobs, job title, job description, post date. I then have the serializer that I talked about before that goes with that. Again, there's the fields, plus I've got an ID field this time, which wasn't in the slides, because I corrected a bug before I did a screenshot and put it in the slide. So that gets served up by the API. Then in the views, so this first part is just to then create a template and then serve that up by the back end. And then this bottom part is what I've already showed in the slide to, again, the data that's coming from the model served up by Django REST. So in the templates, here, this is the most interesting one. Depends what your definition of interesting, but hey, that's the most interesting template I have in this project. And you have a bit of Vue going on. So there is v-for, for example, v-if. There's some event listeners, the on-click for this button. And then you have some functions that have been defined all in this very, very simple Vue file. So here I've got the model, the model data is coming and going in there. Calling from, trying to get all of the model data out, deletion, and also post request to create a new job. And all of that comes together, hopefully. I said it was a very, very simple site. Feel free to slag it off as much as you like. So yeah, a simple form to post a new job, an available job section. There is a bit of a delay in the request, which you'll see now. So there, at the bottom, you have the available jobs. Just reload the page, so it's definitely been saved in the back end, it's not just in the front end. And then to delete, very, very simple. Obviously, when you do tests like this, as I've done, it's purely an experiment. Start with something very, very simple. And I'm going to continue to develop it and use more advanced features of Vue, because I think it's something that's very, very easy to pick up. I've quite kind of enjoyed this experiment. Something that's actually quite good I like about Django is its admin interface. This is something that's built in with it. So you have all your models listed here. You can easily view them and then add new ones if you want. If this could just move out of the way, you have exactly the same as you would in the front end. It's quite cool. And also with Django REST, for example, if I call this, you have that it's kind of a web interface, much like Loopback has. So you can add things to your model if you want. You have the results of the get in this top part, and you can make different requests if you want up here. So I think that's quite cool. Something that's quite useful to have. It's not just all in the back. You can see something nice and visual to understand it, particularly if you're new to this kind of thing, as I still am. It's quite handy to use when you're learning it all. Okay. So benefits I found from using it. Yes, creating fancy JavaScript front ends. As most of the JavaScript frameworks, they're all very fancy. I found that Vue in particular has had quite a shallow learning curve. Angular is the one I picked up first. I found that to be quite a bit steeper. React I haven't even tried. I did it for a week when I started at Tildo and gave up after that. So I found it quite easy. And it is very easy to integrate into the framework of your choice, provided you have a API endpoint set up. Difficulties with Django in particular, it's a bit of a pain in the arse to set up, particularly if you get to larger scale applications. There's a lot to manage, bundling all of the necessary JavaScript files and modules. It's a bit of a ball ache. I did start, when I started developing this application, I started with Webpack to bring everything together. I was just like, okay, there's no way this is going to be ready in time for the presentation. So I abandoned that idea and created something very, very simple. Maybe another time I'll present something a bit better with Webpack and all the rest of it. We'll see. But yeah. So now it's more over to you. Framework of your choice, whatever you use. It'd be nice to hear what your experiences are of implementing the two. Obviously, the idea of meetups is to encourage people to use the technology, so it'd be nice if people get into Vue a lot more, particularly those who are looking to try it and haven't yet tried it. And maybe you can be in my place giving a talk as well. So thank you very much. I've put the code, if someone wants to play with it, it's entirely up to you. There's not much there for the application. There's not much on my GitHub that's actually public at the moment. But there's the link anyway, and open to questions. Any? Either it was really boring and no one was listening, or it was very comprehensive, which I doubt.
So you said Django was a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Do you want to try something else, like Node.js or I don't know, other? Do you plan on doing it? Or?
No, I quite like Django, so I'd like to push it forward and see what happens a bit more. See if I just really do hit a roadblock and can't go any further. In which case, yeah, then I'll try something else, or maybe even Flask, which is a lot simpler. We'll see. So I'm not a massive fan of Node.
Have you tried to get rid of Django templates and use only a static Vue file with your REST API?
That's something that I did try initially. I found it a bit confusing to set up as a very as a start. So I did just start to use the Django templates, but that is something I would look to do next, because it would make things quite a bit easier, I think.
Have you tried playing with roots on the front end and eventually seeing them with the backend roots?
Roots? I don't.
Or having serving different parts of your Vue app, depending on the URL?
No, I haven't. But yeah, as I said, I'm starting to put the two together. It's very, very early stage, as you saw. So no, I'm looking to do things more and more complicated. I have some projects in pure Django that I would like to stick Vue on and see what happens.
Do you think it would be possible, or perhaps it already exists, to make a generator to bootstrap a project using Vue and Django?
Yeah, I don't see why not. You have them for Angular and Django, I believe. There's no reason why you couldn't do it with Vue as well.
And do you know if there is already one?
I don't think so. I think you have like boilerplate code that you can download, but no real generators. But there's nothing to do both together.
To get rid of the pain in the ass.
Yeah, all of the configuration.
Both of them. It would be nice to...
Yeah. Maybe you could do that and then give a talk next time.
You mentioned you used Angular for Vue.js. Did you try any other framework like React, for example, or Polymer? Anything else?
Nope. Just Angular.
So Angular and straight to Vue.js.
Yeah, so I'm very new to the whole web development game. So
And what made you
it's just
choose Vue.js in that case?
because it's, I don't know, it was Eduardo was always pushing it at Theodore. He was constantly talking about it. So I was like, yeah, go on, I'll give it a go. So it was more for that reason. And I'm quite happy I did. It's a nice framework. No more? Thank you very much.